Hello hockey fans and welcome back to another video. Once the 2021 NHL season finally gets underway, Patrick Marleau shall be suiting up in year 23 of his NHL career. Not only is he returning to the San Jose Sharks for yet another season with his beloved franchise, the 41-year-old is also chasing history. Depending on his health and the number of games this season ends up being, Patrick Marleau could break the NHL record for the most regular season games played all time, a record that is currently held by the late great Gordie Howe and has stood in the league's record books for over 40 years. Though breaking such a record is something that should be celebrated, as it doesn't exactly happen very often in today's NHL, there are some people that would prefer it if Marleau didn't accomplish his goal. After all, he would take ownership of a record currently held by one of the greatest players to have ever laced up his skates, while Marleau's resume certainly leaves a lot to be desired in comparison. Given the career that Marleau has produced, the magnitude of the record he's looking to break, as well as the reputation of the current record holder, let's explore each side's argument for or against the record being broken and see which one we agree with the most. So in today's video, join me as we ask the question, should Patrick Marleau break the NHL games record? Let us begin with a brief overview of Marleau's NHL career in order to understand how he's managed to even get himself into this conversation. The second overall pick of the 1997 draft by the San Jose Sharks, Patrick Marleau joined the NHL for the following 97-98 season and wasted little time becoming a mainstay on the Sharks roster. In fact, the Canadian forward would end up playing the first 19 seasons of his career solely with San Jose and set almost every single franchise record for the team, including most goals, points, games played, shots, power play goals, shorthanded goals, game-winning goals, consecutive games played, etc, you get it folks. After leaving the Sharks as an unrestricted free agent in 2017, Marleau headed across the northern border and returned home to Canada in order to sign a 3-year contract with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Having spent the following 2 seasons with the Original Six franchise, a trade to Carolina and a subsequent buyout of the final year of his deal allowed Marleau to return to San Jose for the most recent 2019-20 season and take to the ice in his 20th year with the franchise. However, he wouldn't stick around for the entire year, as the Sharks, who were sat near the bottom of the league standings after an abysmal season, decided to trade Marleau to the Pittsburgh Penguins in February 2020 in order to give him a chance to finally get his hands on his long-awaited Stanley Cup championship. Unfortunately for Marleau though, it wasn't meant to be, as Pittsburgh were eliminated in the play-in round by the 12th-seeded Montreal Canadiens. Once his playoff run with the Penguins had come to an end, and with him still being able to contribute to an NHL roster, the 41-year-old felt that he wasn't done playing hockey just yet. This decision culminated in Marleau heading back to San Jose for round 3 on October 13th, 2020, as he signed a 1-year, $700,000 contract in order to return to the team that drafted him for the upcoming season. So after 22 years in the NHL, at the time of this recording, Patrick Marleau has suited up in 1,723 regular season games. This total currently puts him 5th place on the all-time games played list, behind such legends as Ron Francis, Jaromir Jagr, Mark Messier, and the current record holder Gordie Howe, who played a grand total of 1,767 games. Despite currently sitting in 5th place, there are only 44 games separating Marleau's total with Howe's record, meaning if the upcoming season ends up being a 60-game schedule like the league wants, or even a 48-game schedule to replicate the most recent lockout-shortened year, Marleau will break the record 45 games into the season if he manages to stay healthy for most if not the entire year. So why do some people not want him to break the record? Why do they want Howe to hold on to it instead? Well, the first argument people make as to why Marleau shouldn't break the record is because he hasn't exactly been known as an undisputed superstar compared to his own peers, let alone be regarded as a legend of the game. During his 22-year NHL career so far, Marleau has potted 562 goals and 1,188 points, where he has scored at over a point per game pace just 3 different times, produced more than 70 points in a year just 6 times, and notched more than 50 points in a season only 11 times. So the guy who is set to overtake Gordie Howe's game record has scored at roughly a point every 2 game pace for over half of his career. Really? And what about his trophy cabinet? Well, apart from his many franchise records with the Sharks and his several international accolades, he has been named a 3-time NHL All-Star and was a finalist for the Lady Byng Trophy twice. That's it. No scoring title, no MVP award, not even a Stanley Cup championship to his name. Just a couple of All-Star games and a pair of trophy nominations. Doesn't exactly scream record holder, does it, folks? Now, in Marleau's defence, he may not have been the most productive player, but he sure has been one of the most durable. Throughout his career, Marleau has played less than 74 games in a season just twice, those 2 years being the lockout-shortened 12-13 season, when there was only 48 games that year, as well as the most recent 2019-20 season, which was obviously cut short due to the pandemic. So technically, Patrick Marleau has never missed more than 10 games in a season in 22 years, and he has played close to, if not a full season of NHL hockey every single year since he was 18 years old. Talk about getting lucky with the injury bug. If that's not impressive enough though, the 4 players currently sitting above Marleau on the games list each set their totals while they were in their mid to late 40s or even their early 50s, while Marleau is looking to break the record at just 41 years of age. Say what you want about his numbers, but the guy has clearly taken his conditioning very seriously, and boy is it paying dividends for him now. Another argument as to why Marleau shouldn't break the games record is that Marleau's career hasn't been outstanding enough to secure himself an induction into the Hockey Hall of Fame when he hangs up his skates, let alone be considered a first ballot candidate. Don't get me wrong, Marleau has had a fantastic career over the last 2 decades and has achieved far more than most NHL players ever will, but I don't think it's unfair to suggest that given his production and his lack of awards over the years, his career seems to fit better in the Hall of Very Good. For example, of the top 15 forwards with the most NHL games played, Marleau's 1,188 points rank him just 13th overall in that group, where he sits comfortably above Shane Doan and Matt Cullen. When his numbers are then directly compared to Gordie Howe's 1,850 points, it's not even close, and that's without mentioning all the individual awards and Stanley Cup championships Howe won too. Now of course, Howe played in a completely different era to Marleau, and it would be a little unfair to solely compare their scoring numbers, given the changes and advancements the sport has seen over the last 40 to 50 years, but you can't deny that Mr. Hockey's career is in a completely different class to Marleau's, be it on the scoreboard, in the trophy cabinet, or the impact it has had on the game of hockey. And besides, every single player in the top 10 of the games list is either already in the Hall of Fame or a shoo-in once they call it a day, yet Marleau's career has a few more question marks attached to it. The only player that could be somewhat comparable is Marleau's longtime teammate Joe Thornton, who currently sits 9th place on the list, and even then that's a bit of a stretch given Thornton's vastly greater production and his number of individual accolades. Do I personally think that Marleau will make it into the Hall of Fame one day? Yes, I do, especially since there are players that had shorter or less impressive careers that have managed to get an induction. That said, I wouldn't be surprised if he had to wait longer than most. In fact, you could make the argument that Marleau breaking the games record and cementing his legacy as the veteran of the most contests ever might be what tips him over the edge and earns him his induction sooner rather than later, especially due to how long the record has sat in the history books and how difficult it has proven to break over the last few decades. On the flip side of this argument though, who cares if Marleau isn't a first ballot Hall of Famer or the most accomplished player in league history? He has the chance to rewrite the hockey history books and place his name beside one of the league's most difficult records to achieve for many years to come. Why shouldn't we celebrate this achievement if and when he does it? I mean, how often have we been able to witness a huge league record like this be broken in the NHL in recent years? Practically never, folks. Oh, and remember when Jaromir Jagr was close to breaking the record when he joined the Calgary Flames a few years ago, and people and the media were super excited to see if he could do it? Why should things be any different now that Marleau is the one in the hot seat instead? Obviously, Jágr and Marleau have had completely different careers, since Jágr was more productive and far more decorated with awards, but they were and still are great players in their own rights, so the latter player deserves to be celebrated just as much as the former was if he had done it a few years prior. And lastly, the final argument against Marleau breaking Howe's record is due to the incredible and historic way that Howe set the record in the first place. It's hard for any hockey fan of the last few generations to forget how Mr. Hockey made his triumphant return to the NHL a whole 8 years after calling it quits and having his jersey retired by the Detroit Red Wings in 1971. Not only did Howe go on to play a full 80-game season with the newly merged Hartford Whalers, he managed to score 41 points in the process and be named an NHL All-Star at the ripe old age of 52 years old. Howe set his games record when he was 11 years older than Marleau is right now, and Howe spent 6 years playing in the WHA before his return. You can't write a more incredible story than that, folks. If Marleau was to break the record, it would certainly struggle to compete with the historic, Hollywood movie-style way in which Howe did it. But at the end of the day, records are made to be broken. Yeah, it would be great and wonderful if Mr. Hockey held on to the record and his legendary return to the league was attached to it for many years to come, but I feel pretty confident in saying that if Gordie Howe was still alive and kicking today, he would have been the first person to congratulate Marleau when it was announced that he had beaten his record. In fact, I could imagine that Howe would have wanted to be there at the game in order to celebrate with Marleau when the final buzzer sounded. That's just the kind of guy and player he was. Now, in terms of my opinion on all this, I can certainly understand why some older fans or hockey purists would prefer it if Howe kept the record, given his legendary career, the historic way in which he set the record, and how it has stood the test of time decade after decade. But at the same time, I would love to see Marleau actually do it. Could you imagine how big of an event that would be in the NHL in the year 2021? Could you imagine what this record would mean, not just for Marleau personally or for Sharks fans, but for hockey history and the record books? To see Patrick Marleau step out onto the ice, knowing that he has just broken a record that has stood for almost half of the league's lifespan and was previously held by one of the greatest players to ever play the game. That would be a true sight to behold, and I gotta say, I'm all for it. At the end of the day, records are made to be broken, and it should be a testament to Marleau's durability, longevity, and luck with the injury bug that he can even dream of breaking the record, let alone have the possibility of actually doing it. He may not have scored the most points or won the most awards, but if he is able to achieve his goal next season, he will go down in history as the man who played more games than any other player in the entire history of the National Hockey League. That's a pretty good way to be remembered if you ask me, folks. And on that note, I'm going to end today's video. What do you guys think about Patrick Marleau potentially breaking the games record? Do you want him to break it? Do you want Howe to keep the record? Or do you think someone else will surpass both of them in the foreseeable future? Let me know in the comments below, I would love to hear what you guys think. But thank you very much for watching, guys, I hope you have enjoyed. Please feel free to like, subscribe, share, or watch some of my other videos. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye! A big thank you to Carl Fairbank, Chris Gadsby, Connor B, Jordan Whitehead, Paul Malia, Roman from London, The Legacy, Tom from Finland, and Worthless Pieces for helping support this video via Patreon. If you too want to help support the channel a little bit further and get a shout out at the end of every future video, make sure you head over to patreon.com/oddmanrush and become a patron today.